Awesome. Well, welcome back to Having Juice with OJ with your host Oliver and Germ. And today we are here on a special quest to meet the Merrill Reese, the guy that everybody in Philly knows other than things like the Philly Special and those type of things. But Merrill Reese, you are the voice of the Eagles. That has been known since 1977. Let's start from the beginning. You as just a little boy and your aspirations to be on the radio. How did this start?
Well, my aspirations really weren't to be on the radio. Mm-hmm. My aspirations were to be the Eagles quarterback.
Okay.
It wasn't until a little later that I learned that at 5'8" and 140 pounds, that was not in the cards.
Yeah.
So the next best thing I could think about was growing up, and my dad would take me to Franklin Field to watch the Eagles, and I would look at the broadcast booth. The announcer was a guy named Bill Campbell, one of the great broadcasters in Philadelphia sports history, and that was my goal, to be up there someday. But it wasn't from the very beginning.
Okay. And moving on from that, you were born in West Philadelphia. I was born in North Philadelphia. I feel like we have a relation there, just being from Philly and in this Philly sports town. Like, that's what Philly is known for. It's been a thing. Walk us through that, like, going through high school. You went to Overbrook. High School. And then you went to Temple University, where we are from. And we were actually in Samia Jewish fraternity. And go through your time in high school and transition to college and why you picked up the play-by-plays.
Well, it was interesting. I loved sports. Mm-hmm. I mean, during football season, I was playing football, and baseball season, baseball. I played basketball in the schoolyards all the time. And I went to Overbrook, and I thought I was going to be a basketball player at Overbrook. And I ran cross country when I got there to get in shape. And then the tryouts began. And I'm in 10th grade, and I had played in middle school, and I was one of the best shooters in my schoolyard. Mm-hmm. And I came out, and I came down court for the very first practice, and I pulled up to the right of the key, and I launched a 15-foot jump shot, nothing but net. And I looked over at the sideline, and the coach, his name was Paul Ward, had his back to me. He wasn't even looking. So I came down again, hit another jump shot, came down again, threw a perfect pass to somebody under the basket for an assist. So I'm thinking, this is really going well. So I came back the next day, and I looked at the list, and I was cut. I did nothing wrong, but I was cut. I said, how could they cut me? And then it suddenly hit me. Overbrook High School at that time had 3 players on their starting 5 who were so good that all 3 eventually ended up in the NBA. And here I am, a 5'8" kid, trying to make a team with that kind of talent. They all went on to major colleges. 2 of them, one of them, Wally Jones, was a great 76er who played at Villanova. They went to the Sixers. Another one, Ralph Hayward, went to Seattle. And they were, Wayne Hightower was 6'8". He went to the Bullets. I mean, this was such a talented team. And then a bell went off in my head, and it reminded me, this team was recruited from all over the city. The only reason they had tryouts is because they were a public high school, and you had to have tryouts.
Yeah.
But I had no chance of making that team. But I played sports and I loved it.
That is funny because I can totally relate to that as being a short king. Just playing sports in high school. I played baseball, did mostly baseball. I definitely felt like I wasn't looked at because we had these kids who were like just straight studded athletes. Some are in the MLB now, played Division I, got like drafted, all that. So I definitely relate to that.
Sure.
And just the motivation to keep going in the sports world is, I think, the thing that separates us from a lot of different people is because we still wanted to be involved. I mean, you too. We all just wanted to be involved in sports and find our way of impacting it. And you are somebody who's impacted Philly as a whole.
Now, I did have a little extra advantage in that my mother was a kindergarten teacher who also had a kind of a show business flair. So I had some dramatic lessons. And as a kid, between the ages of 8 and 12, I did a whole bunch of television commercials. TV commercials were live then, in many cases.
Ooh,
so
that's
I did
a little
whole
harder.
bunch of live commercials.
Do you remember some of those commercials? Like, what were they on?
Well, there was a Western show on Channel 6 every Sunday morning from 10 to 11, and it was called Ranger Joe. And they would do a skit, and it was a Western with desperados and all this. So I would do the commercials, and they were for Ranger Joe was a cereal, and it came in a plastic bag, like a potato chip bag. So the announcer said, this is all live, Johnny comes home from school. And I walked in the door of the house. Johnny wants a snack. I put down my school bag. I pulled over a little 3-step ladder. And what does Johnny want? He wants some of those good Ranger Joes. And I climbed up the ladder, and I reached into the cabinet, and I pulled out the Ranger Joes. But nobody had bothered to open the Ranger Joes. So you know how you open a potato chip bag?
Yeah.
And I grab my hands on both sides and going like this, and it won't open. So what do? I put the bag in my teeth, and I rip it, and Ranger Joe cereal goes flying all over the room. And I could hear the off-camera announcer start to laugh, and then they faded to black. So you had things going on with live television that you would never see today.
Yeah, because all of those things would be corrected nowadays. They'd be like, retake, shoot again. But instead, that made it so wholesome.
I remember a television commercial, and this wasn't me. They had a guy by the name of John Cameron Swayze who was a newscaster. Mm-hmm. And it was a show every Sunday night called The Steve Allen Show. And they were live from Miami. And John Cameron Swayze was doing a commercial for Timex watches, and he put the Timex watch near the pool and attached it to an outboard motor propeller, and they put the motor down into the pool, and they ran the engine, and he said, I'm going to show you this watch, and everything is going to be still perfect. And he brings up the motor, and he looks, and there was no watch. The watch was somewhere at the bottom of the pool. And he quickly thought, and he said, somewhere down there is a Timex, and it's still ticking, which was their line. But you don't know how much fun it was to watch live television in those days.
Oh my goodness. The improv just behind everything.
You learn to think quickly.
Yeah.
Which is something you have to do when you're doing play-by-play sports. Mm-hmm. There's always something that comes up that you hadn't seen before. I leave the house on a Sunday, or I leave the hotel for a road game with the realization that I may see something that afternoon or evening that I have never seen before. And there's no way to prepare for it except keep your wits about you and react.
That is interesting, actually, because I had a question about how to not get caught up in the moment, like when you're broadcasting, and like maybe how to like keep that wittiness on you instead of, like, for example, you see something you've never seen before, like how to make sure you don't just get lost in that moment and make sure you continue to talk to the fans.
Well, you know, Oliver, people often say to me, boy, I love when you call a touchdown. And they'll think of certain things that I've said over the years, and they'll repeat them. You know, Eagles fans everywhere, this is for you. Let the celebration begin after the Super Bowl. Or there were different plays over the years. There was one where the Eagles stacked up the Cowboys running back, Emmitt Smith, and I started saying, they stop him again. They stop him again. So these are all things. They talk about calls, touchdown calls. You hear it in baseball. They talk about an announcer's home run call. But the fact of the matter is, that's not what makes a great sportscaster. A great sportscaster really keeps you in the moment and has his listeners or viewers apprised of what is going on. Not just the big plays. I have a little formula. I call it STDD. Score, time, down, distance. I think the most annoying thing that anybody can ever go through is to get into a car and listen to a baseball, football, basketball game, whatever it is, and you're driving and you're saying, and there all kinds of things are happening, and you're saying, what's the score? What's the inning? What's the quarter? What's the down? You have to make sure, you have to have fundamentals. You have to know the basics. And if you know the basics, then the other stuff comes naturally. And also you have to realize you are not a fan. Now, I love the Eagles. I have been loving the Eagles for as long as I can breathe.
Yeah.
But when I'm doing a game, I'm calling a game. Now, naturally, my voice will reflect the great Eagles moments. My description will reflect that. But if there's a bad call and it helped the Eagles, I'm still going to point out that it was a bad call. And if it's a good call that helped the opposition, I'm going to be as honest as I possibly can. Our fans are too intelligent. They know what's going on. So basically, you have to be in the moment. You have to realize your basics, and you have to describe the game. And then when the big moments come, you just react to them.
Now, is that something that, you always kept with you, or is that something that you developed and learned over time as you continued commentating?
Well, I think that's something that I learned as soon as I wanted to become a play-by-play broadcaster. You study the best, you learn, you know what you have to do. You know what the job is. You're not there to root. You're there to describe. You're there. If somebody says to me, and I know they're well-meaning, you make a game so exciting, I think to myself, well, that's very nice of them to say. But I can assure you, I have never made a game exciting. At least I hope I haven't. You describe a game accurately, you transmit the excitement that an exciting game has. If every play is exciting, then you have no levels. They're all the same. If you're at a high level from the beginning of the game, what happens in the fourth quarter when there's real drama? So it has to build. An exciting moment is an exciting moment. Now, as a broadcaster, I have an obligation to keep a broadcast interesting, not exciting, interesting. If we're doing a preseason game and you're in the second half or the fourth quarter, and the only people out there at that point in a preseason game are people who are known only to their mothers, you're not going to be going crazy. But I may have a bunch of topics written down in my notebook where I can bring them up and discuss them with Mike Quick. I don't want anyone to leave our broadcast.
Yeah.
You have to realize that that broadcast is committed to keeping listeners for your sponsors. And you want to be interesting at all times. And then when the great moments come, when the really exciting moments come, you are with them and you describe them and you build, and there's shading and everything else. But you don't make a game exciting. You transmit excitement of a game that is exciting. Otherwise, you still have an obligation to keep things interesting.
That's an interesting perspective, given that a lot of the times fans will turn to the voice on the TV and, kind of associate that voice with whatever's, well, obviously associate the voice with what's going on the field, but directly associate it and say that whatever voice is talking, for example, yourself, is what's happening with the Eagles. So it's like...
Well, here's the difference. I'm going to give you the difference. As we are the flagship station at WIP, the Philadelphia Eagles, we are talking to an audience that is 98% Eagles fans. So if let's say, for example, the Eagles are beating the Giants and I break for a commercial, I will say, the Eagles lead the Giants 14-7. Or, but if, let's say, the Giants are up 28-10, I will say the Eagles trail the Giants 28-10. So I am, just as a newspaper reporter covers a game from the focus on the home team, on the readership, a broadcaster covers a game, unless you're on the network and you have 50-50 in the fans, but you realize who your audience is mostly comprised of, what your audience is comprised of.
Okay.
And to go based off of like pre-seasons, off-seasons, and especially the month after a season. For example, this was a rough end of the season. I mean, it was great to get to the Super Bowl, and I think the lead up and the anticipation was amazing. And it just came down to, good play by Patty Mahomes and all of that. But that month after a season, especially this last one, what do you usually do? What do you find yourself doing?
Well, I get back to my regular life.
Yeah.
Because it's a way of life when you're broadcasting and following a team. I'm there every day. I'm up here at my station, WBCB, and then I go down to the stadium. I'm at practice. I'm in the locker room. I'm talking to coaches. I'm at the press conferences. Sometimes I have a show at night. But regardless of what time I get home, I go into my office and I work and I study and I prepare for an Eagles game and at least 3 hours a night. Even if I get home 9, 10 at night, I still have 3 hours of desk work every night during the football season. The easiest thing, you get paid to prepare. You get paid to get ready for the game. Now, don't tell this to WIP, but I would pay them to let me do the game. It's you earn your money as a broadcaster in your preparation. And players will tell you, you earn your money as an athlete at practice every day. The playing part of it, the broadcasting part of it, Sunday is my fun day. Mm-hmm. That's their fun day when they're out there competing. Yeah. But you make your living in preparation.
Now, building off of that as well, whether it's the off season, the postseason, preseason, in season, you said you're working a lot. It's a very demanding industry. It's a demanding job. You're working upwards of 70 hours a week. For you personally, how have you managed that work-life balance? How have you found ways to, prevent stress, prevent burnout? How have you just made it easier on yourself?
Because I love every bit of it. I love every bit of it. I love the preparation. I love the study. I love the anticipation of the game because it's a labor of love. So, and I have a family that's always been very, very supportive. I have a wonderful wife. She was a former teacher. She carries around flashcards during the week, and she'll call out numbers. So if they're playing Kansas City and she goes 9, and I'll say Juju Smith-Schuster. We'll go with the numbers every single week. Playing the Giants, 26, Saquon Barkley, and you go on down the line. 87, Travis Kelce, so you go. This goes on all week because you have 53 numbers that you have to know.
And also on top of that, you mentioned your wife, Cindy, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So I read that she actually used to make you pancakes on game days because you would get nervous at the link and you couldn't look at food.
True.
Was that something that was reoccurring? Was that like a ritual? Did you have any other like pre-game rituals that you would always go through?
No, that's the big pre-game ritual.
Yeah.
I do have one, and it's something that I learned a lot of years ago from athletes. It's called psycho-cybernetics. And that may sound complicated, but it's really not. But what the theory is what we imagine and what we actually do still put the same frame of reference in your mind. In other words, there was a study that a basketball team went out and practiced foul shots. And then another basketball team went out and stood and sat in a darkened room and envisioned themselves making foul shot after foul shot after foul shot. So when they actually got into a game, they had the same confidence having made the practice foul shots, the imaginary foul shots, as the team that actually did them on the court. Now that's an oversimplification, but I will lie back or sit back for a few minutes at home before I leave the stadium or at the hotel, and just envision the games going on, and I will envision the score, time, down, distance, or if you're playing the Dallas Cowboys, and I'll envision the ball given off to number 20, and I'm saying the give goes to Tony Pollard as he blasts off right tackle, or whatever, and you do this so that when you get to the stadium and a million things are going on, you have a producer behind you telling you what commercial has to be read next. I have a spotter who has a board with the players in formation pointing. We have 30 hand signals or so between us. So in other words, as a play-by-play broadcaster, you are basically focusing on the ball. If you were to say to me, how did Jordan Mailata play? Well, I can tell you that there were no sacks given up from his side, but I'm not focusing, I can't focus on the offensive line or on the defensive linebackers unless they are directly involved in a play, because as a play-by-play broadcaster, you're following the ball. That's what I'm following. So when I'm my spotter now here, he's sitting there with a board, two boards, offense and defense, and the Eagles board will have green pins next to each square with the player's name and 2 squares behind it, so you have the backups. And if a backup comes in, the pin goes next to his name. So let's say I'm calling a pass play from the Chiefs, and they go, Mahomes goes downfield and it is complete, or Mahomes is just about gets it away. Now my spotter, his name is Bill Werndell, will point on the board and give me a signal, and let's say he goes like this to me, and then points to number 55, and I will say, Brandon Graham put the pressure on the passer. He was in, or the second man in on the tackle, or so-and-so strung out the play. What's this mean?
Tipped.
Somebody deflected the pass. Okay, what do you think this means?
Turnover.
Recover the fumble.
Yeah, I was gonna say turnover.
Okay. All right. How about if he points to 62 and goes that? What's that tell you?
Sack.
I was
a sack or a hit?
No. Go ahead. 62 on the Eagles, and he did this. Jason Kelsey was the man who threw the block.
Oh, block. All right.
So okay, that's the block. So we have
There's
all
so
these
many
A couple different things going on there.
That's a lot. Yeah.
There's 30 of them, at least 30.
That is crazy. I mean, to break it down, one, that whole spotter thing is mind-blowing, because that makes sense. Your eyes are just on
the ball.
Just on the ball. And as somebody you've seen a lot of different eras kind of football now, play-by-play, and safety is a major issue right now in the league. How would you say it's been from like then to now? And do you see any like compromises or anything that the league can do and the players can do?
No, because the league has to protect the players, or the game will become obsolete.
Yeah.
Because we know more than we've ever known before. We know all about these horrible cases of CTE. We know about chronic traumatic encephalopathy, which is the damaging of the brain. And we hear so many horror stories over the years. So we have to be aware of this stuff. And the league has to make the game safer and safer. That's why basically they've, in a lot of cases, taken the kickoff return out of it by moving the kickoff up to the 35, and
So
90% of them go out of the end zone because that's a high collision play and too many people are injured.
Yeah, that makes sense, because I've even heard that they're considering just the kickoff just should be
I don't
obsolete.
want to see that happen.
Yeah, I would hate
want
to see that. Yeah, I don't think it makes sense. It's been a part
That
of the
becomes
game.
a scrimmage, not a game.
Yeah,
It's a whole different
But look,
aspect.
who's your favorite Eagles safety of all time?
I personally don't have them.
Well, I'll tell you who mine is. I'll tell you, if you thought about it for 10 minutes and you weren't just right here and you thought, I said, go out in the lobby
out and
and come back and tell me who's the best Eagles safety of all time. You tell me Brian Dawkins. Who was better than Brian Dawkins, number 20? But,
Dude was a beast.
Let me tell you something. Today, a lot of the things that made Brian Dawkins great would draw penalties for personal foul, because he was head-to-head. He would take your head off. He was violent, and that he was supposed to be. That's what made him great. Ed Reed of the Ravens, great hitter. Troy Polamalu. These were assassins.
Yeah, they were.
You can't have the same kind of hits today.
Yeah, it feels like the defense has to like lay off.
Well, not lay off, but get away from certain kinds of hits.
Yeah.
You've seen the flags thrown, and they say hit a defenseless receiver.
Yeah.
15 yards. You can't do that today.
Can't go head to head.
You can't so much as flick a fingernail at the helmet of a quarterback.
I was about to say quarterbacks are a great example.
You can't touch them.
I think that's been like the biggest, not concern, but I think like the biggest, it's drawn the biggest pushback from fans.
Well, and you know what though? What makes the game great? I mean, there are a lot of things that make the game great, but where does it start? What does a team need to be a championship team? They need an outstanding quarterback. And if you start knocking out quarterbacks, the whole level of the game would change for the worse.
Yeah, I believe so.
So we're going to start wrapping this up, as you have a 30 for 30 to get to, of course. But to end it, let's let the viewers know three pieces of advice that you would have for somebody who wants to break into this market of sports that's so expansive and so big.
Well, number one, they have to love it.
Mm-hmm.
Number two, they can't worry about the financial rewards for years. It takes a long time. Number three, I tell this to every young broadcaster, anyone who wants to get into this. The most important advice I can give you is to become a voracious reader. Read as many books, all kinds of books, biographies, history, novels, mysteries. Read as many books as you possibly can. I'm always reading, because how much you read has a direct effect on your vocabulary. Your vocabulary is built through reading, and that will give you the ability to come up with the right words at the right time to offer accurate and entertaining descriptions. There's my three.
Those are good three. And then one more thing, and then we're heading out of here, is I want to know about the Christmas album that Jason Kelsey put together. I heard you are a feature on this album.
On the night before Christmas.
Yeah. And how was that, just recording that with those guys are goofballs. They're all goofballs. I absolutely love them. How was
but
it?
we didn't do them together.
You didn't do it together?
No, I did it in a private studio down there.
Was that on purpose? Was that on purpose?
No. It was made in segments.
Okay.
So whoever was involved, but I see those guys all the time.
Yeah.
And, I mean, you're talking about Kelsey, you're talking about Mylata. They're amazing guys.
Yeah, I mean,
Amazing
Kelsey
guys.
coming back for one more.
Yeah.
Coming back for one more.
He's a great guy.
Yeah.
Brandon Graham is the nicest person in the world ever.
And he's
he's wonderful. That locker room is filled with great guys. Jalen Hurts, very quiet, but a
leader.
Terrific guy. Boston Scott, he's just so outgoing and bright. He's one of my favorites. I have a whole bunch. I can't say who's my favorite, because then I'd say, but I should have said that they're just great bunch of guys. They really are.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much, Merrill. This was an amazing interview, getting to talk to you, gain some knowledge as two people who are trying to break into the sports world. So thank you so much for your time.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate it.